Hello, welcome to Betfair's Cricket Trade Talk. I'm Tom Haylock, joined by Darren Parkin. The English summer of sport is starting. We've got the World Test Championship, the Ashes, Royal Ascot. We've got plenty to talk about, but we're going to focus on cricket, obviously. It's Cricket Trade Talk, joined by Darren Parkin. How are you, mate?
Going very well. Obviously got Wimbledon. I think there's a Grand Prix in there as well. It's huge for the Poms at this time of year. And yeah, our first trip to the World Test Championship, effectively cricket's grand final. So it's a relatively new concept, but I like it.
Yes, it is. Now, just on that, Australia first in the championship points on 66.67. Don't ask me how they configure this. In 19 tests. India second. They won the Border Gavaskar Trophy 2-1 and worked their way into this. They finished second on 58.8 points. It's to be played at the Oval. I look forward to dissecting that. We're going to talk mainly about the World Test Championship and then a little bit about the Ashes as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And just on that, obviously, with the Ashes literally a week after this particular test match, it's a growing concept. It's India and England are our two biggest rivals. Some would argue that they're almost on a par, even though we have the Ashes. But I want to pose the question. So this is for the World Test Championship, the grand final of Test cricket. But in the scheme of things, without being too critical, is it fair to say that everybody watching this video would rather we lose that Test match if it meant we won the Ashes?
Yes, I don't. A little. How's that from you? Don't mind that call at all, Darren. It's an interesting one. I think Australia coming into the World Test Championship at the Oval with one eye to the Ashes, whereas India is mainly been focused on the IPL, and they're coming straight off an IPL. 14 of the 15 players selected in the squad played IPL cricket. There's only one that didn't, as I said, and I think, Australia's focus will be on the Ashes largely, but I still want to win this. And
absolutely.
It's obviously throughout the last 2 years we saw New Zealand inaugural champions. They beat India in this in 2021. So I think Australia want to win, but they'd rather take home the Ashes.
Absolutely, and in that context, it's obviously good timing for us to play a test match at the Oval, which is one of the Ashes venues, to obviously get acclimatised to the conditions. Obviously, you want to beat your big rival, India. We've just played them in a recent series. We lost, so obviously there's that opportunity to get one back on them. For India as well, there's always been questions about their ability on the road, and particularly in places like England where the ball moves around. So there's a lot to prove for them for future tours as well. And we'll go through some of the records of players in both sides later on, and there's a lot for them to achieve in this series in terms of going forward too.
Lots to talk about. As I said, New Zealand inaugural champions beat India. It's worth $1.6 million US dollars, so they'll be wanting to win, the Australians and the Indians. Who holds this in higher priority? India obviously lost the series a couple of years ago, lost this championship a couple of years ago. They'd be wanting to bounce back strongly. If it's a draw, the two teams share the title, so that's interesting. Looking at the weather, I don't think it'll be a draw or a tie. June 12th is a reserve day, so that's a really interesting point. It could go to 6 days if it's wet. So if it's rain affected, it could go to 6 days, which is amazing as well. We'll talk a bit more about that. The on-field soft signalling has been scrapped in the World Test Championship. I don't know why, but that's an interesting one as well. And England won a test here at the Oval in 2021 as well. Rohit Sharma made 127. So we'll talk about the teams. We'll talk about all sorts, but the weather looks great. I can't wait to get stuck into this.
I like that concept with the rest day and the splitting of the results. You always run the risk by chance, whoever the host nation is, which I assume they'll rotate. Like if England made it, for example, that you get the scenario you had in Sheffield Shield finals back in the day where the team that was the host would hold the title if they won. They'd prepare a road, bat first, bat for 3 days, make 800 and turn it into a draw. So it's good in that sense. There's usually results in England. The Oval's not a bad pitch in terms of generating results, even if it is high scoring. Australia will now get 2 tests at that venue. And it's interesting, I know we'll talk about it next week, but the 5 Ashes tests are exactly the same 5 venues as the last Ashes series, and I don't think that's ever happened before. So it's good for Australia to get another hit out before that starts as well.
Yeah, so the Duke ball's being used, as I said. It's a really interesting lead-up, and it is seen probably for all Australians as a lead-up match. We haven't played any red ball cricket leading in. Obviously, there's only 4 players that have been playing county. So Marnus Labuschagne is one of them. Steve Smith, Marcus Harris and Pujara for India. They're the 4 players that are coming here playing red ball county cricket. So that's going to be fascinating as well. The weather, as I said, expected to be mostly dry throughout the test. Saturday, a few showers building up, but we've got that reserve day anyway. So we talk more about that. Let's have a look at the odds, Darren, and we'll go to the head-to-head match odds first. India, Australia, and the draw.
Yeah, you mentioned the draw, but given it's effectively a 6-day test, if it needs to be, Australia at $2.04, India $2.96, and the draw at $5.80, which is obviously a distant way back. You can also bet on the outcome of the match without the draw. So just basically a head-to-head. Australia $1.68, India $2.44. That's turning it into effectively a game of footy where it's a two-horse race without that third option. So, but if you keep the draw in play, and I think that's highly unlikely, as you say, the draw's at about $5.80. Where I am fascinated is the high bat markets. For Australia, the bet looks straightforward. Doesn't mean it is, but it looks it. Whereas for India, it's a little bit harder. If we look at the breakdown of players, obviously Warner, we know his record in England is horrible.
Yep.
He averages 26 in England. And on the last tour in 2019, 95 runs at 7, made 3 ducks, 7 single-figure scores. Compare that to Steve Smith, who's the favourite. He has scored 1,727 runs in England at 60. On the last tour, 774 runs at 111. And he averages 65 against India with nearly 2,000 runs. So India and England are his two best opponents, and England is his best travel venue. So it does seem that the 380-ish on offer for Steve Smith looks pretty good at this point.
Yes.
Harder for India. So Virat Kohli's favourite. Now, he made 186 against Australia in the last test, but he hadn't made a test century in 4 years before that. 41 innings. He averaged 25 in 4 years. Pujara, very good player, averages 29 in England. Ajinkya Rahane, former vice-captain, back in the squad, averages 26.04. So how you play India's lead bat market is trickier. I just think logically you have to back Steve Smith in the Australian high bat.
I think Steve Smith and Labuschagne are the two coming off their county cricket. So obviously David Warner and Cameron Green have been playing IPL. And as I said, 14 of the 15 in the India squad have been playing IPL. Pujara is the one that interests me. What odds are we getting Pujara?
For Pujara at this stage, you are getting 470 on him. So he's third favourite. So Virat Kohli at 380 is your favourite. Then Rohit Sharma, who you mentioned, made 100 at the Oval on their last test match there. He's 440. Obviously, the skipper been in very good form of late. And then you look at Gill, who will open the batting at 5s. And then you got Kishan 640, Rahane 680. So that's the market with Kohli favourites. Don't mind Pujara based on his technique seems to stand up in all conditions. So does Kohli's for that matter, but obviously it's a long run of outs for him. He wouldn't have been India's high bat in more than half a dozen of those 41 innings, I would think. Marnus, you mentioned, is an interesting one because that last Ashes tour in 2019, that's when his career was kick-started. So he was out of the side. He was the first concussion sub in Test cricket history when Steve Smith got knocked out, and he hasn't looked back since. So he obviously shows that he can handle those conditions pretty well.
Before we move on to other markets, I want to talk about the teams firstly. So Rohit Sharma, captain, averages 42 in England. Shubman Gill, averaging 53 in first-class cricket, only averages 34 in Test cricket. He's got very little experience in the UK. He's played 3 county games in the past, 1 Test match, I believe. His last 4 matches in the IPL, he's had 3 centuries. So, he's had a stretch of 4 matches in the IPL for 3 centuries, or 4 innings. So, Pujara has had 3 centuries for Sussex in the lead-up in county cricket. He's scored 115, 151, 136 and 77. So he comes into the World Test Championship in form. He's averaging 68 this season. So he's in form. He's played Test cricket. I'm pretty keen on taking him there.
Well, when he's in form, Pujara, he's the closest thing they have to Dravid. Where Dravid was the wall, you just can't get through him. So, you look at, they've got a lot of shot makers in their side. Pujara is the traditional batsman, if you will. So, if he's in form, he's very hard to dislodge.
Ajinkya Rahane, as you mentioned, blistering form in the IPL this season as well. His record isn't great in England, but he obviously led India in that famous series in Australia to victory. So he stands up against Australia and he was fantastic there. The wicket keepers and the bowlers. So I think India will go with Bharat. He's the likely first keeper. He's got a first-class batting average of 37. He hasn't played much in the UK. Australia have seen him. He hasn't really impressed that much. And then you've got Kishan, who's a left-hander, played for Mumbai Indians in the IPL. So he's another, probably a fast-scoring, dashing kind of wicketkeeper batsman. Goes okay, but I think they'll go with Bharat there as the wicketkeeper. The spinners are the interesting one. Do they play 2 quicks, 2 spinners? Does Ashwin and Jadeja play? Jadeja was in fantastic form in the IPL. He won the IPL there as well. So you got Ashwin and Jadeja. Jadeja bats probably 6, lowest 7. I think he'll bowl a lot of overs, and they could go in with 1 spinner. So I'm really intrigued as to what happens there. Then you got the seamers. Mohammad Shami, really interesting. You'd think his bowling would be perfect for England conditions, but he averages 41 in first-class cricket in England.
Yeah, he does. The whole thing's interesting. You mentioned the keeper debate as well. Obviously, they're really missing Rishabh Pant, who had the car accident, which has left him injured. And then in that bowling stocks, as you say, I mean, Jadeja seems to have performed against us all the time. If you look at his overall record in England, so with the bat, he averages 30, does have a century over there, 23 wickets at 46, so he hasn't had huge penetration with the ball. Obviously, in India, he's taken 194 of his 264 wickets. So he's another one who's probably just got to translate that form onto the road a little bit. And you would think that, Indian quicks don't get favourable conditions very often in their home country. They're often used to open the bowling, rough it up a little bit, then the spinners bowl all day. In England, clearly they're going to get conditions that suit them a lot more, just like they do in Australia with bounce and things like that. So, yeah, I'm surprised by that record because you'd think that they would finally get that opportunity to play in conditions that are suited to fast bowling.
Yeah, India come here without Pant. Bumrah's a massive as well.
Yeah.
Obviously, he's a threat for the Australian team. So no Pant, no Bumrah, big outs. I'm intrigued that before we get to the Australia's team, I'm intrigued that Australia are short price favourites here. Where do you sit on that?
Yeah, I mean, look, India have won the last 2 series in Australia against us.
The last 4 series.
Yeah, that's right. So they've beaten us at home, they've beaten us away. That last away series, because obviously the first time they beat us was when Smith and Warner was suspended, but they came back and beat us again with those guys in the team.
And with a second string team.
Yeah, like they were missing Ashwin.
Kohli went back.
Yeah, Kohli went back.
Parental leave.
Ishant Sharma was unavailable. Bumrah. Yeah, they had so many that weren't playing in that and were still able to get the job done. I think their depth has stood up a bit more than ours. It's probably just simply horses for courses on conditions. There's probably a belief that our track record in handling English conditions would be a little bit stronger. But yeah, I think there's value in India because they probably don't deserve to be underdogs.
Yep, we'll talk about the betting strategy coming up as well. Now let's get to Australia. So Usman Khawaja and David Warner open the batting. All eyes on David Warner, who's announced his retirement during the week. He's ending up in the Sydney Test match. Potentially,
interesting.
If he gets picked. What do you make of your backing or laying that call now?
Yeah, I'm probably laying the call. I'm curious as to whether they're putting pressure on the selectors by saying, "Hey, you don't have to worry about dropping me. I'm going to retire, but just keep me in the side until then." But obviously, look, if in the first, I think he'll play this test and then he'll start the Ashes. But if 2 tests into the Ashes, he's Broad and Anderson are nicking him off for fun again. Yeah, you wonder whether he gets a tap on the shoulder and they're like, yeah, sorry, mate. Look, he's been a superstar and ideally players would, write their own retirement ticket. But yeah, I'm a lay for that at the moment because I think he's got a bit to prove to even get that chance. So where do you sit on it?
Not everything is a fairy tale. Yeah. I'll agree. I don't have anything against the call, but I'm more in the column of laying it. I do think he needs to perform and you'll find out if 4 bad innings, he could get dropped here. So we'll wait and see how that plays out. Khawaja averaging 38 in England. It's very hard to open the batting in England. But Australia's middle order, you've got Labuschagne who's averaging 55 in the UK, Steve Smith 59 in England at first class level, Travis Head at 34, Cameron Green, who comes off, he had a pretty good IPL, he had an amazing century that I watched, making I think he needed 4 off the final and they needed 1 to win and he got a 4 to win. Alex Carey, make or break series for him as well. He hasn't quite. It's been a bit put to the slaughter in certain positions where he's come to score quick runs and hasn't made the most when he's had really good opportunities to make runs as well. And then you've got the bowlers, and our bowling lineup's fantastic. We've got Pat Cummins, Stark, Lyon are the 3 locks. Scotty Boland looks like he'll get the position over Nisa, who came into the squad for Hazelwood being out.
Yeah, Nisa been in unbelievable form in the counties as well. But yeah, Boland, He ripped England apart, so they'd have an eye to the Ashes with him. His record in all tests that he's played is good. Seems perfectly suited to these conditions with his accuracy. Cummins averages, I think, 20 against England. World-class player. We missed him on the back end of the India series. I think that the blend and Carey, I agree that he's got a bit to prove, but I think his upside with the bat is better than what India are going to get out of Bharat. So
Yes.
if he can perform, that might be a circuit breaker for this match.
An interesting heading towards the Ashes there as well. Just one thing before we move on to our the new ball and our betting strategies. We're playing at the Oval. It's notoriously a good batting pitch, but it is always played late summer. So this is the first ever Test match at the Oval in June in the history of cricket.
Okay.
So we're coming off kind of a wet county season start at the cricket season in the UK. It's going to be slightly different to a really dry oval wicket, which you might see in the Ashes. So that adds another element. Teams coming off very limited red ball cricket. I can't see it being a draw, but we'll get to that now if you want.
No, I agree. And look, it's similar to here. We used to have the Perth Test played in late January, early mid-Feb every summer. That's now, an early November Test match, and it's probably changed the dynamic of that one a little bit with the before summer starts as opposed to the back end of a hot summer. And yeah, the Oval has been host to some fantastic Test matches over the years, and yeah, it's obviously you got the extra added factor that it's a neutral Test against India, which we've never played before. So, what does that mean for everything?
Yeah, I think that I actually like the fact that it's played in the UK. It actually probably suits both teams in various. We've obviously played a series in India where it turned sideways, and Australian conditions are a lot bouncy. England's kind of the perfect middle ground for both teams here, and it's going to be a really interesting Test match. Let's get into the bets, and you can kick off because I've got a couple of great bets I'm pretty keen on.
I'll let you bring that one home. But with the new ball, I think Steve Smith high bat, I know he's favourite, but, averaging 110 in England on the last tour, 60 in England overall, 65 against India overall. Plus he's had a county lead-in. He's primed, I think, and far less question marks than the others have. Obviously, question marks on Warner, on Head. Khawaja's had a very good couple of years, but question marks in England. Obviously, Marnus would be the logical second elect. I think India, at the moment at 296, would be valued to win. I think there is a very strong chance that both teams will trade as favourite in this match, which gives you the opportunity to sort of move in and out with both of them. So India at value at the moment at 296 would probably be the way that I'd go.
So that's how you're starting the Test match with the bet on India?
Yes. And then I think if they start well, then obviously you'll get some value on Australia, and it'll be a topsy-turvy type match.
That's the beauty of Test match cricket with Betfair. You can actually set these traps. You can phone up, set these traps. You can back India now at the 296 or 298. They're around that mark, and set up a lay trap and say 210 and trade that way, put it in and say keep in play on the Betfair market as well. You can phone up as well and lay off and hedge and trade throughout the Test match. It obviously at the end of each day it goes off in play, so you can trade at the end of each day's cricket as well. I am very keen here. They're one of the great bets. Laying the draw.
Yep.
$5. It was $6.20, I think, or even longer, into $5.50. It's just edging its way out now. I think it's about $5.80 in the Betfair market at the moment to lay, or $5.90. I can't see it being a draw. You've got two teams. One, as I said, I keep harping on this, 14 of 15 for India coming off IPL 2020 cricket. They're coming in completely cold in terms of five-day cricket. There's a reserve day. I'm not even sure the market has picked up on this. So if it is wet on the Saturday, if we're going to get the showers, if you get 2 or 3 hours rained out, they'll come back on the 6th day and it won't be a draw.
The other factor, I think, in that is that both sides have vulnerable top orders. So I don't think, I might be made to look like a fool, but I don't think either side with the bat's just going to rip the other one apart and make 480. So I can see the ball being the key factor in the series.
Yeah, so first-class cricket at the Oval so far, 9 innings, only 2 scores of 300 or more. Only 2 scores above 350 in 4 Test matches recently at the Oval, and all innings out. So, and they're at the back end of the summer. You've now got coming off a wet winter and spring into an Oval Test played at the June. Different conditions to a dry end of summer Test. I can't see this being a draw, and I'm happy to lay one of the great bets.
And I reckon there's less draws in Test cricket than there ever was. Teams just score faster.
And
The
I think
match rollicks along at a fair pace. It's a less common occurrence.
England have changed the game in that sense.
Yep.
Obviously, the last time India and Australia played, it was the flattest pitch you've ever seen.
Yeah.
It was the one time Kohli made runs on an absolute road.
And you get that in the subcontinent occasionally. There's usually one Test match that just doesn't break up and it just flatters a tackle.
I could have chalked up a good 60 there, I reckon, on that pitch. Not the other 3 tests. So very keen to lay the draw. I can chop out a little bit later, but 580, I'm dead set against that. I agree with you. India value, 298, 296, 298, $3, around that mark. So I'm heavily laying the draw, having something small on India for a better result and Australia for a profit as well. That's how I'm starting the test.
Yep.
And I think I'll be winning.
I'm pretty confident on that as well. Yeah, I think laying the draw is a very smart strategy. And look, Pujara is probably the one who holds up the most, and obviously Smith and Marnus in terms of runs for Australia as well.
The Betfair markets will form first innings runs, Australia and India first innings runs. I'll be keen to see where that ends up with an eye to be against and back low. I am very bullish Pujara, who brings the best red ball cricket form. As I said, his form in the county is fantastic. 3 centuries so far, averaging over 60 in county cricket, in first-class cricket in England at the moment. I think he's the bet for most runs for India. And if he bats time, that's the only way that I think could be a draw. Because the others score much quicker. He goes at a strike rate of about 40. He's kind of, in county cricket, he's been a bit more in the 60s this season and playing a few more shots. But I think he'll be very hard to get out. And any other bets for you, mate?
I think that covers it on the most part. I think, Jadeja, I'm curious at balancing his poor record away from India with his very good record against Australia.
A big game player.
Yeah, he's a big game player, excellent against us, improving on the road. His batting gets better all the time. I think he's up to averaging 40 or thereabouts in Test cricket. So I'm not sure where I'd play with him yet, but he'd be value in most things. So and especially if Ashwin doesn't play, as you mentioned, if he's the only spinner. I know the conditions will seam around a little bit more, but he'll bowl a lot of overs in the conditions still.
I agree. Very close eye on the teams. There's a chance that they just play the one spinner, and I think it will be Jadeja over Ashwin. So that's a chance. And if they do pick that, I'll be looking at man of the match markets or whatever it might be. Most wickets even. For India, he's right up there. He'll bowl a lot of overs. Let's cast our eye to the Ashes, if you'd like. A look ahead. So the teams are going to be really interesting. Hazlewood out of the World Test Championship. Leach out for England during the week with a side strain, I think it was.
Yes.
So it's I'm so excited.
Oh, yeah.
16th, Friday night, perfect time slot. Australia plays 6 tests in 7 weeks, 7.5 weeks. So it's going to be duelling on everyone and taxing on everyone, especially the quicks. And then you got Broad and Anderson, who are getting pretty old. They're getting on. They've got to play 5 tests in 6.5 weeks as well. So I think the bowling lineups are going to be a really interesting market, Darren, because a lot of changing, I guess, throughout the series.
Yeah, in the 2019 series, Anderson opened as favourite for most wickets, then got injured, I think, between the first and second tests, missed the rest of the tour. Obviously, Stuart Broad then became their leading Ashes wicket taker ever. But it's such a different England. There's guys we haven't seen like Brooks and Duckett, obviously. Yeah. 552, they made it 7 and over against Ireland. Now, I know that is Ireland, but that's the way England play. It's explosive batting where they declared a tee on day one in a test match in New Zealand at 350 odd on their recent tour. It's a lot of fun.
How good is it?
Yeah.
I'm putting in the lay bin that I almost enjoy the way that England going about it.
Oh, it's
almost
terrific.
like it. It's sick.
And it drags you along because, Australia will have to play at that tempo to obviously match them. It makes test matches bounce around at 1,000,000 miles an hour. So, yeah, very much looking forward to it. It's a vastly different England team to the one that got poleaxed in Australia on the last tour 18 months ago.
It's going to be a really volatile series. I can't wait for it. I am looking just a few bets off the top. I'm surprised in the market and the overall Ashes that it's so close between Australia and England as well. Australia are outsiders for the first test, but they're almost even going into the series market, which is really interesting. So I can't remember the last time Australia started favourites in England. Would have been a long time ago. But that's going to be really interesting. I am looking to back Cummins for most wickets, for Australia particularly, but maybe even the series. Now, Nathan Lyon's average in the UK is pretty average. He's got 61 wickets in England at an average of 41. So that's pretty average. His last series was not bad. But Cummins, you think of all the quicks, will play the majority of the matches. He's obviously the captain. So he's my lock for most wickets for Australia.
Definitely. And in the last series, Lyon took a lot of wickets in the first 2 tests and then sort of tapered off a little bit from that point on. Cummins, the most logical. He also seems, I know he missed test matches with injuries in the past, but it hasn't happened to him a lot lately. He's a lot more durable. He sort of holds together, whereas, Stark's missed with injury. Hazelwood's already out injured. You'd think Boland and even Nisa will go in and out of the squad. So it does feel logical for Cummins. And England will be interesting. No Jofra Archer, Broad. They've almost flirted with dropping him a bit in recent times. But as I mentioned, he's taken more wickets in Ashes than any English bowler in history. And I think they'll just line him up on Dave Warner and just say, just go to town and see if he can nick him off early.
Warner's come out and said he won't be as defensive as he was last time over there. So he'll look to be a bit more positive. It's going to be really interesting if he nicks up third ball, playing a drive, and everyone's criticising him. But I like that approach from Warner. Just be a bit more positive, play your natural game, don't go into your shell. So the Ashes series winner, England $2.42, Australia $2.16, drawn series $7.60 at the moment on Betfair. So
the last tour was a drawn series in 2019.
Very rare.
First in 50 years
there you go.
that was between Australia and England. 1972 was the last drawn series, which is quite remarkable.
That is amazing.
That you'd think with the even contest at times over the journey that there'd be a 2-2, or they even played 6 test series back in the day, so a 3-3 or something like that would have been possible.
Who wins?
Australia, I think, but only because there's a few unknowns in the England team. England could certainly come out and blow us away, but they've got 4 or 5 players that haven't played in the Ashes before, so I'm keen to see how they handle that.
Does Bazball stand up against Hazelwood, Stark, Cummins, Boland, Nisa?
I think sometimes it will, sometimes it won't, and I think that'll be the interesting part of the series. I think we'll see certain matches where England go ballistic, and there might be other matches where they get bowled out for 120 in 35 overs, and it goes the other way for them. So, but very much looking forward to it.
Either way, it is going to be an enthralling battle. It's my favourite sporting event of any series anywhere around the world. I love the Ashes. It's the pinnacle, and 16th of the month, 16th of June. I can't wait for it. First test. Thank you for joining us. We're doing another show ahead of the Ashes, so we won't give all the secrets away. But Darren, thank you for joining me.
No worries. Let's win the grand final first.
Let's lay the draw and back high, lay low, do it all on Betfair. Thank you very much.
Imagine what you could be buying instead. For free and confidential support, call the number on the screen or visit the website.